I'm Donald Moffat.
And I'm Heather Menzies. Logan's Run will not be on tonight.
But stay tuned for the Charlie Brown special and the Fat Albert Halloween special.
And we'll be back next Monday night.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Coming February 21st, it's Faye and the Moon, the latest graphic novel from Franco and the Saturn Sisters. Faye, mourning for her missing mother, sits night after night below the moon that her mother loved dearly. One night she discovers she can pluck the moon out of the star-filled sky. Back safe in her house, she holds it close, feeling comfort at last. Then Faye loses the moon and finds that taking it has awakened ancient monsters, rats, dragons, and more, who hunt for it for themselves. Will Faye be able to reclaim the moon, find her own inner strength, and save the world from eternal darkness? Faye and the Moon comes from the minds of Franco, whose works include Tiny Titans, Superman of Smallville, Archimaniacs, Itty Bitty Hellboy, and The Ghost and the Owl, and art from the Saturn Sisters, whose animated works include Sesame Studios' The New Neighbors, Hulu's The Awesomes by Seth Meyers, and PBS's Mira, Selkie from the Sea. Pre-order Faye and the Moon now. Available in bookstores and comic shops everywhere, February 21st.
This portrait of Jean Grey, the Phoenix, is one of the ones I did for a series of single frame mock-up kind of covers for the Marvelocity book, where my concept was it would work like an accordion. When you open up the book, getting past the initial Captain America cover, you would fold it out and you get Iron Man and character after character after character, and it allowed me then to do multiple Marvel character portraits. Phoenix being one of the most primary Marvel concepts, because her storyline back in 1980, the invention of that character, that maturation of Jean Grey into the Phoenix, was one of the best storylines in the history of comics and stands out as one of the most important female superheroes.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Always happy to welcome Mark Russell back to Word Balloon, a guy I've gotten to know the last couple of years. A guy who always does interesting work over at Ahoy, really crazy off-the-wall stuff, and we'll get into it. But I'm really glad that both DC and Marvel have found corners of their universes to give Mark opportunities, because all your stuff, man, always interesting. Good to see you.
Well, good to see you. Thanks a lot for that introduction, John.
Absolutely, man. Well, it's great to hear that. And in fact, when I'm like, what are we going to talk about? And I'm so glad you said Superman Space Age. What a great series. I mean, Mike and Laura Allred killing it on art, and your great story as well. It reminds me of the Fantastic Four life story that you did in terms of spanning the decades. And tell people, if they weren't paying attention, the final volume is coming out in a week and a half, but give people the 10-cent pitch on Space Age.
Superman Space Age tells the story of Superman in one of the universes that doesn't make it in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and he knows that the universe is going to come to an end in the 1980s. And yet, what do you do when you're Superman and you know that despite all your powers, you're going to ultimately fail? What does it mean to be Superman then?
This is great. It reminds me, and obviously I'm sure it was in your mind making this, of Darwin Cook's New Frontier, especially given that this story starts in the 60s, and the first volume is the 60s, the second volume is the 70s, the third the 80s. You have a lot of real world events happening, and because it's a slightly different Earth, we're getting slightly different looks that evoke the Silver Age. Batman's armor and costume is a bit different, and there are great little wrinkles of differences of things that happen on this Earth. Maxwell Lord gets into the Wayne Enterprises, and just the reaction to Superman, and even his own doubts and the Kent's doubts about his involvement in the world. It reminds me of Man of Steel, where the feeling is don't get involved. But man, great stuff. And of course, then too, a lot of the characters, especially in the first volume, the first two volumes, have war memories. And you see Jonathan Kent's war memories. You see Lois going over General Lane's memories and stuff. Honestly, I just think it's such a great story, man. And I think I love your attention to real history and then the fictional touches you put on it too.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think a lot of what drives the story is the what if about, what if the DC universe actually happened against the backdrop of actual U.S. and world history, and those kind of drive the historic events that we actually lived through. Kind of drive the origin stories that I come up with in this. They're a little different than the origin stories you might be used to. For example, like Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor are meeting, to like bid on a military contract because they're both industrialists. And then when Lex Luthor wins the contract, that sort of sends their stories out. Like Bruce Wayne has to figure out what to do with all this expensive military tech he's just invested in, and then the idea of like Batman occurs to him, so it's a little different than the DC canon, but I think it's more true to the universe that we live in, which is strange because this is supposed to be an alternate universe, but in a lot of ways it's more like our universe, our world, than I think anything that I can remember reading in DC before.
Was it always your intent, or was it DC's intent to pair you with the Allreds? Because there's something about their art that evokes that Silver Age. I mean, we've all seen, the great, I forget what Batman thing it was, where Batman's doing the Batusi. I mean, that's kind of a classic Allred image and stuff. But yeah, so was that your hope, or did DC put you guys together?
It was both, actually. We both made lists of like artists we thought would be great for this project, and Mike was on the only artist on both lists. And the reason why I thought he'd be fantastic, him and Laura both, was because, like you say, he's got this great command of like pop culture history. He's a guy who intimately knows like about pop culture in the 60s and 70s. And also, just his lines, like his thick, solid lines are just, I think they kind of evoke the sincerity and the honesty that I wanted to bring to Superman. Well, not that I'm bringing those qualities to Superman, but I think the things that I wanted to focus on is the core values of Superman. Just him being sort of sincere and honest in a world that's sort of cynical and duplicitous. And I think his artwork really lends itself to that sort of tonality.
Did he contribute any pop culture, touchstones that he wanted to put in to your story? Or
he puts things in the background and stuff, and especially when it comes to the scenes in the Hall of Justice, where I would put in my notes like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are there with assorted other heroes. I think you see a lot of this, especially in this third volume, in like just the sort of how deep Mike's bullpen goes, and the kind of heroes that he puts in the background he has show up. It really is kind of like one of the thrills of getting the artwork for the third one, just to see who he would put in and where. And there's a 2-page spread that when I saw it in the third volume, and I hadn't written it as a 2-page spread. I written as and he moved panels around and crowded certain pages just so he could clear space to this 2-page spread of like the heroes of the Justice League springing into action during a crisis, and it was just mind-blowing to me. It was like one of the best pieces, best single drawings I've ever seen in comics. And I would be loath to ask, but if he offered to give that to me, the original artwork, it would certainly see a place of honor in my house.
I so hear you, man. And again, I haven't seen the third issue yet, but there are just great money shots of the Batcave and the Fortress of Solitude and the Hall of Justice, and even cityscape moments. And it's funny, I loved that in Volume 2, you had this great kind of Daily Planet scene revolving around the Automat in New York. And I just have been watching the Automat documentary that's been on HBO Max
I
lately.
saw it too. I'd written the scene with the Automat long before that came out, but yeah, I've always loved Automats, and I hope they make a comeback. And I'm amazed that they didn't during COVID, the COVID shutdowns.
Oh God, you're right about that. Sure. Good Lord, you're 100% right. Although, behind the glass, there are people handling your food and putting them in the slots and everything.
Yeah, but then you don't have to interact with somebody, and they don't even have to be there while you're selecting the food.
That's true.
And you can have the thing I really loved about the Automats, other than the fact that it's freshly prepared food. It's not just prepackaged.
Oh yeah,
fast food. But other than that, the thing I really love about Automats is that you can have the craziest meals imaginable. You can have a fajita with a slice of pumpkin pie with some orange sherbet ice cream. You can sort of choose your own adventure.
Absolutely, man. You're right. French onion soup. No, absolutely. You can have a United Nations plate. Absolutely. That's hilarious. Right. And I don't know. We never had them in Chicago. They primarily were in New York and Philly. Everybody, if you haven't watched this documentary, and if you watch Word Balloon, I'm into old school 20th century pop culture and stuff. You'll die. Mel Brooks is in it. The people that are in it, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Colin Powell, all these amazing people have these great memories of eating at the Automats.
And Mel Brooks is like in it, and he's hilarious, talking about like the Automats and what a centerpiece they were of his childhood.
Absolutely. No, it's a great story. But I don't know. Does have you eaten at any? Like, does Portland? That seems like such a great idea for Portland, and Portland is all about kitschy restaurants and stuff, that they would do this.
You would think that we would have, if anyone had Automats, we would. But really, what I remember Automats from is my childhood in Eugene, because they would have them sometimes at like hospitals or public buildings. We would sometimes have Automats. Wow. And I would look forward to going to like places that had Automats, because it was cheap, so we could eat out affordably, and the other is just like you could just make the craziest meals imaginable.
Absolutely, and fresh hot food, like you said. All right, enough about the Automat. Back to this great mini series. Damn, man, no, it is, as you can see from this cover, it's as much a Justice League story as it is primarily a Superman story. But you really get into Batman's head over the decades. And it's also great to see the reactions to the Kennedy assassination, Watergate, and the ripple effect of these, major events in American history and how they impact things. So again, we're going into the 80s in this third volume, and also the backdrop and the combination of basically your interpretation of a New Frontier sort of story, but also a Crisis on Infinite Earth story. And again, like you said, this is one of the Earths that don't make it.
Yeah, and there's not as much historical background to this because it ends kind of abruptly in 1985. But there is one of my favorite scenes in this is where Lex Luthor actually gives like a "Greed is good" speech, like from Wall Street.
That's great, man. No, really, man. You get these characters, and truly, I've always appreciated who. And I'm forgetting now. You did a Future State arc, didn't you?
Yeah, with Steve Pugh on art. We did Future State about Superman having to go to Lexor to sort of negotiate with Lex Luthor, where Lex Luthor is dictator and Superman is like powerless. So, but yeah, that was a lot of fun to write too.
That's great, man. Well, you see, DC Patrol and Art Baltazar are saying they've got him. I guess Artie hasn't cracked it open. Artie, you will not be disappointed, man. It's great. And man, I really hope at some point at a convention, Mark, you get a chance to meet Art and Franco, because I think they would appreciate your kind of humor and vice versa.
Well, good. Yeah, if I'm ever in your town, stop by and say hello. I'd love to meet you guys.
Any chance? Are you coming to Chicago for C2E2?
No, I don't have any plans to, but I might. It just it's easier if I'm invited, and two, I have to see what else is going on there that weekend. I know that's a busy weekend. I usually don't go because I'm going to another con usually.
Yeah, I've got MegaCon. I think is the same weekend.
Yeah, there's a lot of cons that
Seattle's right before it or right after it. I forget which. Emerald City and everything. Yeah. No, I understand, man. Well, and I'm hoping
That's true. I usually am going to Emerald City during that time because it's so much closer.
Sure,
it's
man.
easier in and out.
Oh, that's funny. I already wants you to know you're a good man, Mark Russell. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, you get the
It's on my
Balthazar
business card.
Yeah, the Balthazar endorsement. There's your pull quote, man. Oh, this is interesting. Maud wants to know, why did you choose to kill off? Oh, spoiler, but it's true. It's in volume 2. Everybody, why did you choose to kill off Hal Jordan in Space Age? And without, obviously, I'll re-ask the question: does Hal's death in particular have an impact on volume 3?
Well, I think to answer the first question, I think we needed somebody to really demonstrate that there were high stakes, that they were playing for all the marbles in the first issue, or in the second rather, and I wanted, and unfortunately it made the most sense for him to go. So from a storytelling standpoint, that was why, because we needed someone to really demonstrate that this was a existential crisis for the Earth, that and he was so instrumental in saving the Earth from a nuclear war in the first episode, that it just seemed natural to sort of dovetail the story, having the story end with him stopping or sacrificing himself to end another invasion. But it does have an impact in that John Stewart becomes the new Green Lantern, and cool. He's made the Green Lantern specifically with the purpose of warning the Earth about the Anti-Monitor, and like assessing like when things with the Anti-Monitor are going down, and they're assessing like what other universes are collapsing left and right, as the Anti-Monitor drains them of antimatter. And so they know for a fact that, the Earth's time is close, because the Anti-Monitor is starting to drain the Earth of all its, or drain our universe of all its antimatter. So it plays a pretty key plot point.
I also really appreciate the conversations in volume 2 that Brainiac has with Superman, and and also Lois. And by the way, I kind of love. It's interesting, the genie's back in the bottle as far as the regular DC universe, Earth 1 or Earth Prime, whatever they call it these days. But the Clark Kent identity is back in place, and there's this great conversation between Lois and Clark about, or maybe it's one of the Kent's observations about Lois.
Yeah, I think it's Clark talking to Ma Kent, talking to Martha about the fact that he's in love with Lois, but he can't really. She doesn't really. She doesn't handle Superman with kick. She's not in awe of Superman like everybody else. She handles him like a journalist. She's like grilling him, asking him hard questions, and it makes it really hard for him to get close to her, even though he's as Clark Kent, he's in love with her. But she's just like not giving Superman any softballs whatsoever. And Martha kind of observes, well, I think the fact that she sees you for more than the cape is actually kind of what you love about her. And that's when sort of the light bulb goes off. It's like, this is not an obstacle to our relationship. This is what will make it work, is the fact that she doesn't worship Superman.
And also the fact that the guys of Clark Kent gets Clark an honest opinion from Lois about him as Superman and stuff. And that was always my debate back to Brian Bendis, when he's like, no, this will be great because Superman is about truth. And, this is better. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I think people are more comfortable talking to Clark Kent than they would be talking to Superman. And I really felt like that scene kind of illustrated that.
I loved Bendis's reveal and the way he handled it. But yeah, I'm kind of the personal persuasion as a storyteller that it helps to have this sort of secret identity. Somebody who people feel comfortable just telling the truth to. And somebody, it's sort of like how the Emperor Augustus used to dress up in rags like a beggar and sit outside in the forum and beg. And that's how he was like sort of the secret boss. He could see how Romans were actually behaving and how people would, if people were actually happy, or, he wasn't just seeing this Potemkin village of his empire because he would go out once a year dressed as a beggar.
That's great, man. And by the way, all right, and this is a good chance to transition into Second Coming, because I would like to see now a Roman scene that's essentially undercover boss played out by the Romans. And I love this latest issue of Second Coming that is both a modern deal of what's happening to poor Jesus and as he's back in the modern world and how the modern world is reacting to him. But as we see from this cover, we also get this wonderful Crusades moment where some of these knights are in the business of selling relics.
Yeah, and it's the point of that issue is largely that that when your church is more about making money, when your church is more about like getting asses in the seats and selling and moving some product, that all it really does is cheat people out of their salvation. That it really just sort of cheats the people that you're trying to save, and it also instead of the church becoming an asset to your spiritual life, it takes your spiritual life and makes it an asset of the church. And I think that sort of summarizes in a lot of ways Jesus's, at least in my series, his complaints about what has been done to the Christian religion since he has left.
100%. Yeah.
He created his teachings to help people sort of get out from underneath the thumb of institutions. And he comes back to find out it is actually now the thumb.
It's quite literally in your story. Absolutely, man.
Right.
And I think of George Carlin when he used to talk about the invisible man in the sky that tells you what you need to do. And if you don't listen to him, he's going to put you in a fiery, burning place. But he loves you. He loves you, and he needs money. And that's certainly what we get from the Crusade story. But as you say, the modern track as well is following the exploitation of organized religion as well. And no, this is great, man. Again, and for people that are new to Second Coming, is this volume 2 or volume 3?
This is volume 2. Volume 3, actually, the first issue comes out in April. And
great.
It follows the fact that Sunstar and Sheila have had a baby, and this baby has superpowers, which is kind of something that both Sunstar and Jesus can both relate to, both having been babies imbued with superpowers.
Absolutely.
And they both sort of have memories of like what that cost them as children, or how it cost them their childhoods, or how they had to grow up more quickly. Or it's like if a chihuahua's barking and snapping at you, it's no big deal. You can sort of laugh it off. But when a Great Dane does it, everyone's terrified. So if you're a Great Dane, you have to learn to be a nicer dog quicker than other dogs do. And that's sort of what Sunstar and Jesus had to go through, where it's like we've got to grow up fast and learn how to like not terrify people, if or otherwise we're just going to become tyrants.
No, absolutely. And for people who don't know, Sunstar is like the big hero of the Second Coming world, and he befriends Jesus, and they're good friends. They used to be roommates back in volume 1.
Yeah, it was originally pitched as a Superman story, but they said, not in a million years. I believe Dan DiDio's actual words were, I get death threats when he fails to say the Pledge of Allegiance. There's no way I'm going to have him sharing an apartment with Jesus Christ, which is fair enough. He said, but he did say, make it a different superhero, one that you own, and we'll
that's great. He was encouraging about the story. That's great.
Yeah, and it turned out to be, just a golden suggestion too, because in retrospect, it probably would not have worked to have two super nice guys together. And because I'm not using Superman, I'm using Sunstar. He's, I can make him more of a bit of a jerk, more of a guy who's sort of like seen it all and done it all, and like is okay with abusing his power a little bit.
No, it reminds me of when Dick Giordano told Alan Moore, listen, we just bought all those quality heroes like The Question and Blue Beetle and the like, and it's like, instead, why don't you create your own stuff? And we got Watchmen out of that. So I think that's great, man. And again, people along for your rides, they appreciate your kind of humor that we saw back in the day when you did the Flintstones. And and Mark, I've told you before, and I love Steve Pugh's art, but I really am a Hanna-Barbera, or I guess I was, because you guys converted me. I was a Hanna-Barbera purist, and if they didn't have that character design, I'm like, and especially, I'm sorry, I'm old. I didn't like the John Goodman movies. I didn't like the other,
The movies are unwatchable. true.
But what I missed was, and then I did finally read your stuff because guys like Bendis are like, you got to read it, man. It's the spirit of the Flintstones, and it absolutely was. And as I've told you before, you had the bedrock version of the VFW, and all these cavemen complaining about their different territory wars and telling their war stories. Very, very interesting common thread, man. And in a lot of your stuff, when you do go to things like that. But no, I adored your Flintstone run, and I grew to love it. Absolutely, man. Well, you know what you're doing. It's great stuff, and to put that modern spin on it and have that bold choice. Was that by design on you, or did Hanna-Barbera said, because I know you guys had to get some sort of vetting for your stories. Did you not for these things, or maybe you didn't? I don't know.
I don't think Hanna-Barbera cared, or were very happy with what I did with the Flintstones or any of their properties. But no, it was pretty much just, conversations I had with Marie Javins and Dan DiDio about what I was going to do with the Flintstones. And Marie was great. She championed it, and like when, in fact, after the first issue, we got all these notes from Hanna-Barbera saying you can't mention any deities. Fred's got to say yabba dabba do once an issue, and this laundry list of things I had to do. And she said, "Don't worry about it. Don't listen to those."
Hilarious.
People. Yeah, just write what you're going to write, and so I did. And for better or for worse, that's what they got.
Well, it's for better, and also Chaikin's Rough and Ready, and that's why the Rough and Ready thing.
Oh, it's funny. I like the Rough and Ready one a lot,
and it hit me immediately because his artist had that great animation style, and it evoked that original Rough and Ready look.
It was probably, out of all of the Hanna-Barbera stuff, that DC did, probably the one that hewed visually the closest to the original cartoons.
But man, Tom King taking Elmer Fudd and putting him with Batman, and that great romance comic that Sam Humphries did of the Legion of Superheroes and everything, and Bugs Bunny. Great stuff, man. No, that whole run.
Yeah, I love that. I wish that, and I think the secret sauce of the Hanna-Barbera stuff with DC was that it felt like you were kind of driving a rental car. So you weren't afraid to peel out and, let it go on the highway a little bit. And I think that was what, made a lot of these titles so creative, was just that people felt they had the freedom to take some chances.
Did you, and forgive me, Mark, did you do Snagglepuss?
Yeah.
All right, and my God, you turned Snagglepuss into Tennessee Williams, essentially.
Yeah,
fucking brilliant.
One of the highlights, one of the very, very rarefied air highlights of my career was when the Tennessee Williams Play Festival in Provincetown, Massachusetts, invited me to come out, and they did a stage reading of a play version of Exit Stage Left: The Snagglepuss Chronicles. And it was magical. It was a dream come true for me.
I bet, man. That's excellent. Yeah, please, if you got more about that, that's wonderful. Jesus.
No, that's pretty much it. That's the story. But I was thrilled, beyond thrilled.
Well, Wayne agrees. Says Snagglepuss was a crazy read, and Bill Schmidt, I guess, met you in Kansas City and got to tell you how much he's enjoyed Superman Space Age. Yeah,
hey, Bill,
obviously. Mike and Laura's art obviously takes a while and stuff. The last volume came out November-ish of last year.
December, yeah.
Okay.
No, you're right. I think it was late November. But yeah, it's just that it's always better to get it right and get it fast, which is also sort of a theme in the series. And so we wanted the third issue, especially because so much happens, and it's got so much. It's much more action oriented, and there's just so much more that goes down in the third issue than the first two, that we really want to make sure Mike had and Laura both had enough time to sort of nail all the notes. And believe me when I tell you that they did. I have no doubt some of the best art and comics I've ever been associated with.
That's so great to hear, man. And these are oversized issues, everybody. So these are good meaty reads each time out.
Don't flinch at the $10 price tag, because they're each 80 pages. So it's actually cheaper than the $4 for 20-page comics that you're
100%, man. No. And again, we're a week and a half away. It's going to be February 21st that Space Age comes out, or the 20th. I know DC comes out the day before a new comic day on Wednesday, but look for that, and it's definitely going to be worth it. And yeah, you can even see at the bottom it's rated 13 plus, but it's good. It's an adult story in the best way. So I think it's a very I appreciate the tone, and of course, yeah, like you said, Mike and Laura are just killing it on the art. So way to go, man! This is great, absolutely great. Let's talk about another Ahoy book, and that's of course Billionaire Island. And Business Dog is continuing to be the financial leader as this world is falling apart, and this dystopian present. I suppose it's not really. If it is future, it's 2 weeks from now, essentially. And yeah. I mean, and also, geez, man, I do appreciate the dark humor in this. But you put this out when you started doing Billionaire Island right during lockdown, right during COVID, right, and supply chains, and when again, that's why it's like
crazy.
It's not the future, it's the present, and it's
right. This comic about about billionaires going to an artificial island, and then the pandemic sort of destroying the world that they actively try to convince people is not happening as it is destroying them. It was weird to watch COVID unfold immediately after the first volume came out. And give credit to Ahoy for taking a chance on a book that just sounded asinine at the time. But this is the second volume, and it tells about the aftermath of Billionaire Island, what happened after Billionaire Island was destroyed. And basically what happened was it took the rest of the global economy with it. And so people are scrambling. They're, everyone's being foreclosed on. Everyone's, people are breaking into and living in malls, abandoned shopping malls. And the guy who's now sort of in charge of Belcanto, the social media network, that was the focus of the first one. He realizes that if they can capture Business Dog, who's now owns most of the world's wealth, that they can sort of bring the world back to life. That they can capture him and his $10 trillion. They can sort of give the global economy CPR and bring things back to the way they were, or so he thinks. And that's kind of what the story of the second volume is.
That's awesome, man. You'll forgive me. I just saw that my laptop is on low power, and the plug pulled out. So hopefully I will not work out. Stand by. There we go. Get in there. Did it work? Hopefully.
And like you mentioned, art by Steve Pugh, who is the artist I worked with on the Flintstones. I've worked with Steve on a lot of things now. We've done Billionaire Island together. We've done a few Superman Future State together, and the Flintstones. And he's just one of these guys I love working with because he gets the jokes, he gets the sensibility, and he knows when to sort of let the artwork be funny and when to let the artwork just be serious and let the writing just sort of be the star. And I will never miss an opportunity to work with Steve Pugh.
That's great, man. And also I really appreciate, the interiors are great and I could certainly scan through them, but I love this cover. And again, that's a real challenge today, man, is to make a cover stand out. And this, no question, if it is on a comic book store rack, you're going to be like, what the hell is that? Wait a minute.
Yeah, I think that's the key to a good cover is something that somebody walking down a comic book store rack from 5 or 6 feet away, something's going to catch their eye and make them do a double take, which is why I tend to sort of eschew the sort of multiple characters in a battle pose cover, or really complex covers with 100 things going on, because they just tend to blur in together with all the other covers when you're walking by. But something like this is very simple and iconic, and not like the other covers. And this is I think kind of an ideal thing you want for a cover if you're designing a cover for a comic book, something that pops and doesn't look like issue 5,983 of the Avengers or something.
Sure, absolutely. Is this the wrap up to Billionaire Island, or will there be volume 3?
Well, this is the fourth issue, so there's one more after that, and we are we're not sure if there's going to be a volume 3 yet.
Okay. No, it's a great story, man. Absolutely. And again, if you like Mark's humor, then you're going to love Billionaire Island if you haven't already picked it up. Another DC thing that I loved back in the day was One Star, not that long ago. One
Thank
Star
you.
Squadron. Absolutely,
Yeah,
man.
This is like one of my favorite experiences in writing comics, and I feel like it sort of went under the radar, probably because all the characters are D-list heroes. But I feel like it's absolutely one of the best things I've ever written, and I got to work with Steve Lieber, who just nailed again the sensibility of this. I feel like this was like sort of, I don't want to use the word masterpiece on my own work, but I feel like this was sort of my quiet classic. I wish more people had read it. Maybe it's not too late because the trade just came out. So if you go pick it up,
man. That's good to hear. I'm glad that the trade is freshly out there. No, I agree. I mean, look, everybody. There's Red Tornado. There's Power Girl. There's Fire Star.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm wonky on my Firestorm characters, and I know she comes.
There's Power Girl and the Heckler. I mean, yeah, there's some real deep cut heroes in this one. Flying Fox, and I created a character called Minuteman because originally I wanted to use Our Man, but they said no because he was being used in something else. So I thought, well, if I have a Minuteman character, I can give him sort of a Revolutionary War theme. And Minuteman is kind of in a way even more pathetic than Our Man because his powers only last 1 minute. So he mostly just does birthday parties and car shows where he can show off his powers for a minute and then sign autographs. He does a Comic-Con.
This is your combination of like what you do at Ahoy, and again, getting to play with these C and D level heroes. And mentioning that, God, I hope One Star Squadron might be on James Gunn's radar.
I know he's read it. He tweeted about it, so I know he's read it. So hopefully, at some point, it gets worked into the new DC universe phase.
Well, based on the what he did with the Suicide Squad, the fact that he wants to do an Authority and Booster Gold TV and movie projects and stuff, to me speaks to the fact that again he appreciates the 1,000+ characters of the DC universe and can't wait to get his hands on a lot of them.
Yeah, and I know he enjoyed it. At least he, politely said he did in his tweets. But to me, the real soul of this series is about like sort of what happens when you're no longer able to perform at a top level. I mean, most superhero comics, most comics in general, about people at the sort of the peak of their lives. But most of our lives are spent either going up to that point or coming down. And this is a comic about people on the way down. And it's like, what do you do with people? Or how do, you got to make a world that works for people that are no longer as useful as they used to be. And this is kind of like how these superheroes have been used up and just sort of left to fend for themselves after they're no longer useful as superheroes. And I think it's a much bigger story that's playing out in our society. And it's something, I think it's got more resonance than just being, a superhero action comedy series.
Well, it's a classic example of your story sensibility and some of your ideas. And in fact, when we emailed each other today, I'm like, all right, I know you got the 2 Ahoy books. What else you want to talk about? You mentioned Superman Space Age, but you also want to talk about some pitches that you've made over the years that might have gotten rejected. And I'm so glad you want to do this, Mark, because this is the kind of stuff that fans are like, yeah, what did they say no to? I mean, and it's I just had a conversation with Dan Jurgens last night, and people are like, what characters have they said no to you? And Dan, Christ, I mean, the guy's been doing it since the 80s, and a lot of times it was just situational of, oh, we can't use Luthor in this story because he's happening in this other story, that kind of thing. But no, again, the fact that Second Coming started as a Superman story shows you where your brain is and everything. So yeah,
that's a very different conversation than the not in a million years conversation, which I often have with people. But yeah, in fact, I've kind of made a career out of like rejected pitches in a lot of ways. Like, I had when Batman and Selena Kyle were getting married in Tom King's run, I had actually pitched like sort of a side story to DC where I said, I think it'd be funny if the Joker sent Bruce Wayne a like a wedding present, and like a salad shooter or something, stupid. And then Bruce Wayne would just be obsessed with, why did the Joker send me a salad shooter? Does this mean he knows my secret identity? Does this mean that he knows that Batman is really Bruce Wayne? And the story would follow Batman as he's going about his life and chasing villains, but in his mind is completely distracted because he's just thinking about this salad shooter the Joker sent him. It's making his work hard, and then finally ends up in a situation where he captures the Joker, and as he's taking him away to Arkham, he says, "How did you know? How did you know that? How did you know to send me the salad shooter? How did you know my identity?" And Joker replies that, "Oh, well, I just figured that whoever Batman was, he was somebody with a lot of money. So I just sent different gifts to all the billionaires in Gotham. And I didn't know until you mentioned the salad shooter that in fact was you." and so he kind of gives away his own secret identity. And that was, again, a not in a million years conversation. So I took that to Ahoy, and we made that a plot line in My Bad, which is sort of our irreverent superhero spoof. And then another pitch that DC said no way to, that made it into My Bad, was I want to do one where there was an assassin who was killing superheroes, but they weren't getting the actual heroes. They were merely killing people with names similar to the heroes. Like they would kill a guy whose last name was Supperman, or kill a guy whose name was Mike Batman. And it was about the Justice League being, on the one hand, sort of just confounded with how dumb this assassin is, and two, it also how it made it almost impossible to catch him because he was so bad at choosing his targets that you never knew where he was going to strike next. It was sort of about, in a larger sense, about how stupidity forces you to take it seriously, and also you waste far more energy and attention dealing with stupidity than you do with the sort of a smart challenge. But again, DC was not happy with that idea, so I took it to Ahoy, and they were like, "Yes, please."
Yeah, man.
So,
no, and shame me for not having a My Bad cover ready, because yes, another great series that you did.
Oh yeah, I should have sent you a PDF, but and I co-write that with Bryce Ingman, with art by Peter Krause and colors by Kelly Fitzpatrick. But it's probably the most fun I have working on a comic, is working on that one, because it's just nonstop craziness. They even let me draw, like, if you remember that from the comics from our youth, they had the toy ads, like the page with like the X-ray specs and the sort of the whoopee cushions and stuff. They let me draw like a page where I did fake toys, like ventriloquist lessons, or in stuff. So that was really cool. I'm glad I was able to do that.
Mark, that's honestly, when I go through God, I don't even know that, I'm sure they're not dollar bins anymore, but whatever they are, I always go through the cheap comics, and I constantly look for Silver and Bronze Age comics that have those great ads and everything. Not only, the Johnson Murphy onion gum and the Raquel Welch pillow that you can buy and build your 2-man submarine. God, I love that stuff, but also even just the house ads for DC and Marvel and those books and stuff. Just everything in them. Skittle Pool and Skittle Bowl and those kind of weird games. The Aurora monster models, the Hostess fruit pie ads and stuff. I was telling, who was I telling about there was in the 70s an ad for, I want to say, Converse gym shoes, and it was Dr. J and Rick Barry were the two.
Oh, yeah.
70s.
No, I remember that one.
Yeah, and working in sports radio, we had Rick Barry on not only our radio show, but we also had a local TV show. So Rick did the TV show, and I brought him one of those back covers, and immediately he's like, I sign at least a dozen or more of these a year. And it's so funny. And it's great because Dr. J is classic vintage Dr. J, dunking and all these great action shots. And it's like, now it's my
Barry's
turn.
like shooting free throws.
Yes. It is the most white and straight man, just like, I play basketball too, Julius.
Oh, yeah. I guess he's shooting free throws this way because he shot Granny.
Right,
style.
he did the Granny. Yeah, they should have had him doing the Granny free throws. You're absolutely right. And he's like, yeah, could I be whiter in this? I'm like,
my first job in high school was working at a Bob's Burger Express, which was a chain owned by Rick Barry, because he was from Eugene, where I grew up, and so he owned a chain of hamburger stores.
That's hilarious. No, he's amazing. Well, yeah, there you go. Now Wayne's telling us his favorite ad, the Sea Monkeys. Absolutely, man. Gross.
I did an ad for the Sea Monkeys in my thing, but it was all very fig leafed because like little starbursts, with the actual genitalia, which we couldn't show in the ad.
Are there other pitches that come to mind as far as?
Well, there's one that I haven't. Well, Not All Robots was a pitch that nobody wanted until AWA took a chance on that.
AWA, another great series of yours. Absolutely.
Yeah, shows you how much people know. There's one that I would love to do that I haven't really worked up the courage to send anyone yet, but it would be about sort of like a Jetsons-like comic, where it's these people living this sort of idyllic sort of nuclear family in the future with this utopian future where there's everyone's got their own little private plane that they take to work and they live in the clouds. And then it turns out that this is all sort of like the fever dream of somebody dying on the ground in like a dystopian sort of nightmare. And he's dreaming about the future he was promised when he was a kid, which is the Jetsons reality. And then the other half is like him, like, sort of like dying on Earth in this very dystopian reality.
Oh my God. Well, I hope you find the right artist and make that happen and everything.
Yeah, we'll see.
Mentioning Not All Robots, was that something that you had the DC robots in mind? Maybe the Metal Man or Red Tornado, or
No, I never thought about taking that to DC or Marvel. I wanted that to be like my, its own sort of story, because the robots are sort of a metaphor for toxic masculinity. So I didn't want to use existing characters that people have very different feelings about. But yeah, they're also kind of like seen sort of sympathetically in that these are robots who believe they have privilege. They believe that the world has sort of been turned over to them and they're the masters of the universe. But really, they're just as disposable as everyone else, because when a newer model comes along, they just get thrown on the scrap heap and replaced. So it's kind of about not believing your own hype, not believing your own press, and understanding that if you see somebody else as disposable or as like sort of lesser than, it's just a matter of time if you're going to be joining them on the heap. So that's kind of what the series is about. But it's funnier than I just made it sound.
I thought it was a great. I hope is it still running at AWA, or did you wrap it up?
We wrapped it up. We sold out of the first printing, so for a while they were completely out of it. But they're doing a second printing, and we're in talks about doing a follow-up.
Fantastic. Good to hear. Wayne wants to know, would you consider crowdfunding any of these offbeat, unused pitches?
Yes, absolutely. I would consider crowdfunding the Jetsons one I was talking about. And another thing that I'm really looking forward to, I don't know if I'm going to crowdfund it, but I've got an artist lined up, Ryan Alexander Tanner, who's like a local artist here in Portland. I love his work. But we're going to be doing a noir / science fiction series together. So basically a black and white science fiction. Each issue, it's like an anthology. So each issue tells its own self-contained story. But there's sort of this dark science fiction stories. And we're looking we're evaluating where we're going to take that one.
Sign me up, man, because first of all, I love black and white comics. Secondly, I love old-fashioned pulp sci-fi that essentially was disguised noir. And I had the pleasure of being part of a show for the Discovery Channel called Prophets of Science Fiction, and we discussed a lot of Asimov's early stuff and other great science fiction writers of the pulp age. And yeah, I do. I Bradbury. A lot of that stuff is just so great and lends itself to, again, the noir trappings. But give the guy a spaceship, make the lens. The lens.
No, they're very noirish. The story ideas we have are very noirish stories, but they're about time travel, or they're about like aliens and stuff. And I'm very excited for how these two genres just seem to like work together.
That's great. Now, DC Patrol said he couldn't stick around, but he was excited to hear about the new Kickstarter. Do you have a Kickstarter?
Yeah, I've got a Kickstarter. It's not for a comic; it's for a book of my cartoons. And by DC Patrol, wish you could stay longer. I'm also, in addition to being a professional writer, a terribly amateur artist. So I draw a lot of cartoons, or at least I have over the decades. So I'm doing a book of a lot of the single panel cartoons I've drawn over the years, and I'm kickstarting it. So if you want to find it on Kickstarter, the name of the project is Bunk Bed Mishaps, and search that or search me. And right now we're doing pre-launch page. So if you go to Kickstarter and look at Bunk Bed Mishaps, just so you can subscribe, and then you'll get updates when we go live.
Bunk Bed Mishaps.
Yeah.
Excellent, man. Good. I'm so glad, because I'm like, I didn't know he had a Kickstarter. Wait a minute. How come you didn't tell me about that?
My very first Kickstarter. But I'm using it for my book of cartoons. I figured nobody in their right mind would take a chance on my cartoons, even though I love them. I think they're great, but it's just not what I'm known for.
I understand, man. No, and again, we were Jason Inman and I were just talking about, people may not know unless they ask him. Jeff Johns is a good amateur cartoonist. I mean, again,
I didn't know that.
Maybe, it would probably be too much for him to even try to do even a 10-page story, let alone a multi-issue arc or something like that.
I wouldn't even insult the publisher by trying to draw a professional comic, but for cartoons, I'm perfectly capable.
That's great, man. Oh, there you go. Wayne just saved the project. All right, Bunk Bed Mishaps, everybody.
Thank you, Wayne.
There you go. Absolutely, man. Very cool. And also, I wanted to acknowledge some of the Marvel stuff that you've done back in the day. And of course, Life Story. And I see these parallels, as I said earlier, with Superman Space Age and what you did with your version of Life Story. Of course, we also had Zdarsky do Spider-Man Life Story. I don't know if there have been others beyond yours and Chip's, but both were great miniseries. I adored them.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that one big similarity is like when you have characters age, they have to ask themselves the question: well, what is a life? What am I going to do with this lifetime? What is it that's really important to me? Which is a big difference in telling the story of characters who age over time than to somebody who, is sort of in a goldfish situation where they're just like every 30 seconds is like, the world kind of starts over for them. So absolutely. It really is much more meaningful, I think, to be able to write stories about characters with that sort of real, urgency and mortality in mind.
And again, we see the real world reflected in through their eyes as they naturally age, rather than perpetually being the age that they are in the regular comic universes and stuff.
Yeah, the Fantastic Four is different than the Superman thing in that it goes for 6 decades. So the first half is kind of about how historic events and the real events of the world sort of changed them, and the second half is more about how that much they've changed the world, through their being heroes for 30 years, and about how they are changing the world. And I think it's good because you can kind of see both sides. Like, we are both shaped by the forces that we grew up in, and yet we are also kind of responsible for the world that we hand off to the next generation.
Absolutely. And again, this explores not only a lot of big moments in the real world, but also big Marvel history moments. And then also I think of your Captain America Marvel snapshot story. That was great. And it's one of those great quirky, when Jack Kirby came back to Cap in the 70s, the Mad Bomb story of Cap.
Oh yeah, I love the Mad Bomb story. It was great. And yeah, this was sort of my take on it. And it's about like what's happening in the Bronx during the Mad Bomb story, which happens in Manhattan, and about the people who never had anyone come by to fix their neighborhood after the Mad Bomb created this wave of violence, and about how that made them really easy, made them prime recruiting territory for villains. And it's told through the eyes of a character, and like what his neighborhood went through, and his reflections on it. And I'm very proud of that being able to write that story for Snapshots and for the whole series. And Kurt Busiek is the one who sort of asked me to write this. And one of the real treasures of my career is getting to sort of talk with Kurt Busiek and like learn a lot from him, just like about how he makes comics, and about like, oh, so this is what a real pro does,
You're selling yourself short, man. But I understand and I appreciate.
I thought I would, I thought pretty highly of myself until I, started working with him. I was like, no, this is a guy who actually knows what he's doing.
That's so funny. I just got the advance of one of the hardcovers that's going to collect so many of the arcs of Astro City, and it's through Image now that he and Brent and the company and that group have gotten the rights back from DC, and they're putting their own volumes out and stuff. No, you're right. And it drives me nuts. Thank God I had one interview with Kurt Busiek back in like 2006. And he's been very nice and just very politely gone, I don't know. I'm not built for podcasts. I completely disagree. He's a great conversationalist. And just like you, I absolutely appreciate his point of view. I will never, I'm not going to harangue him. I mean, there are a couple great creators who've just been like, dude, I love what you do, but I don't want to do it. And it's like, all right.
Yeah, I'm surprised because we would talk for hours sometimes, and he was just like, on point and funny, and just a great guy to talk to.
What are you going to do, And another great one shot that you did was this Avengers story during Judgment Day. And I really appreciated that. It was really a great look at Hawkeye. It's really a Hawkeye story, but we also get Luke Cage and we get Natasha in there, or are they in there? And both that and the Marvel Snapshot are on the Unlimited app, and everybody can check them out if you've got the Unlimited app, or hunt for the stories. But in both cases, these are great stories, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a great time writing them. It's a fun sandbox to play in, as I'm sure everyone knows.
Are you still pitching to them, or might we see more Marvel?
I also did a Blade one shot with them, where it was like called Vampire Nation, where he's the sheriff of Dracula's sort of vampire enclave in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And I pitched like a limited series based on that, about like basically what happens after that single issue. And it morphs into like Blade having to hunt down all these vampires from history that at least historical figures that nobody knew were still around, but they've been turned into vampires. And then like Blade has to go hunt down like these famous historical figures.
That's awesome, man. Wow. You and Rodney Barnes must be, this is like when Alan Moore used to say, and it's true, that in different parts of the world, the steam engine was being developed at the same time as, Thomas Fulton and everything. And, Robert Fulton, pardon me. And it's just, again, it was like in the zeitgeist, and Philadelphia has all the founding fathers still surviving as vampires in modern day. And this cop discovers this terrible conspiracy, but that sounds great. And I just love the idea that the way Marvel has incorporated Dracula into the Marvel universe. And it's like he's a legitimate Marvel villain. And I love when he shows up in various Marvel stories. And again, Blade is a great foil for him. And I love Blade. I'm looking over right now to my Gene Colan portrait of Blade that I got him to do in the early 2000s and stuff. So no, I'm a big fan of those stories.
Yeah, no, I think one of the great things about being able to write him was being able to write him against Dracula, because in a lot of ways it's sort of like the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object. And like Dracula is sort of this inscrutable villain who nobody's been able to get the better of for like 600 years, and Blade's this guy who just like smells nonsense from a mile away, and you can't fool him. So to me, I would love to write a whole series about these two characters, like their chess match.
I'm with you. Let me tell Marvel right now. Yes, if you're listening, Marvel, we want a Mark Russell Blade Dracula series. I think that would be amazing, man. Very, very cool. Announcements coming later this year that maybe you can't talk about. I don't know what else.
Yeah, I've got a new title with AWA. I don't know if it's even announced yet, so this might be this might be like the announcement. But I'm doing a new series with them called Rumpus Room, which is about a billionaire who locks people who have crossed him in one way or another in his rumpus room, and then he has them one by one crushed and turned into like this really excellent skin cream. But his one concession to them is that he lets them vote on who the next person to be crushed is going to be. So
wow,
not like a total monster, but that's coming out. I don't think we have a specific date yet, but it's coming out later in 2023.
God, I'm so glad to hear that, Mark, because really, I love AWA. I think their product has been amazing.
They're one of the few publishers that I'll read just based upon the publisher, you know.
No, some of my favorite people are working there, and I've had the pleasure of talking to Axel at length about the line. And is Axel? I hope Axel's still there.
Oh yeah, no, Axel's very much in charge. Like he's the guy I deal with, like pitch new projects to and stuff.
Well, this reminds me that I should check in with Axel and see what's happening at AWA. And again, the Ahoy guys, as I was telling you off the air, you know, Stuart Moore, Tom Pyre, everybody over there, I really appreciate. I'm a massive fan of The Wrong Earth and a lot of their other stuff. Is Snelson you, or is that another writer?
No, that's not me. Gosh, I'm gonna blow it.
Yeah, I'm sorry for everybody,
but it's not me.
But I noticed that there was a My Bad and Snelson. Were they text pieces in Second Coming or something? And again, maybe I'm misremembering what you sent me.
You know, yeah, I sent you Second Coming and Billionaire Island, Cult of Dogs.
Billionaire Island, yeah. But I do love that not only do we get interesting, comics, but also you'll get great back matter as well in the Ahoy books.
Yeah,
I think that's
no.
Great.
They really commit to like putting a lot of extras in their books, which is fantastic because I mean you get so much for your money with Ahoy comics.
Absolutely, man. Well, again, as always, dude, continued success. Everybody, again, we're a week and a half away from Superman Space Age Volume 3. And really, do yourself a favor, catch up on the series before February 21st. And again, Second Coming, still killing it. And same with Billionaire Island. And more neat stuff coming from Mark Russell and all these other projects that we've mentioned. So way to go, dude. As always, I'm glad to talk to you. And whenever there's something new, Mark, if I miss it and you want to promote, please let me know. I'm always happy to have you back.
Well, thanks, John. I always have a great time on Word Balloon, so thank you.
Well, that means a lot, man. Thank you. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching. More great stuff next week on Word Balloon Live. Until then, everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.